a high priority. Now, here's a stat. This blew my mind. I know of it last night, and this is 65-7. I don't know how many people would have ever thought that. And again, that doesn't mean that some of you didn't. But this is something that last night when I was about to wrap things up, this blew my mind. There have been 1,500 bowl games plus, 1,500 plus bowl games in college football history. Georgia's 58-point win is the largest margin, the biggest margin of victory in a bowl game ever. And that makes sense. You don't usually see bowl games at 60-10. I think one time I've seen a couple of teams score in the 60s. I mentioned Nebraska, Florida, but even that was 38 points, 55-19 USC over Oklahoma. There are some that get out of hand, but out of all those games, that this was the worst, most lopsided bowl game, and this, of course, a championship game of all time.
Yeah, that's normally because teams are more evenly matched, I guess, in most bowl games than they were last night. And that's just a testament to how great Georgia is. And TCU, nothing to really hang their heads about. I do think there's, obviously some things to question and some things to wonder about. And I do think that the nature of that loss does make you rethink just the overall season. Like, I would think that you walk away from it and it's probably the best ride you've ever been on in your life if you're a TCU fan, and there's certainly a lot of things to celebrate, but at the same time, I don't think anything last night brought it into like, oh man, I never want to talk about 2022 ever again or anything along those lines, but I do think that was so bad and so lopsided and one-sided that it does kind of change the taste in your mouth after the way that wrapped up, more so than had you lost, let's say 35-14, or, just maybe if they weren't, basically treating the fourth quarter like Georgia's going away party.
Oh, they did.
And getting everybody off the bench known to man, with 10 minutes plus to go. I mean, maybe that you feel differently, but that was so lopsided that I do think it leaves a little bit more of a sour taste in your mouth than just losing. By losing in such huge fashion. Yep. But, people in the chat and elsewhere listening on can let us know how they feel about, last night, and I'm sure that they will. But, it's hard to describe in so many different ways just how dominant that was. Nothing like we've ever seen, obviously, as you pointed out with that final score, and it could have been so much worse. It truly could have. And I'll tell you this is the one thing that I thought about more than anything last night was the fact that I've got a fire truck going by. Kaz Kazadi and the mindset of TCU and the physical nature of TCU and their speed and all these things that you know about them. And obviously we know about Kaz from his time at Baylor. One thing that I will own that I said yesterday that I was completely wrong on, and I mentioned this on the podcast as well, is I said that Georgia might very well win this game, and Georgia, very well is the better team. And I picked Georgia to win. But I just felt like if there was one thing that was not going to happen, TCU's players and their staff and all that, they were not going to, at any point, no matter what it got like, not be fighting and not back down. And they would scratch and they would claw and bite and do whatever they had, and they were going to give Georgia a fight. I was wrong. They did for a little while.
Yeah, they were beat down.
But they were done. They'd thrown in the white towel probably halfway through that game, and there was no, rallying, and there was no. I think even Kaz Kazadi was doubting himself, maybe for one of the first time. You know what I mean?
Well, doubting what he thought they would be that night. Yeah,
that's what that's what I'm saying.
Because they were just. It was as if you're a.
I thought if anything, they would just stay in the fight.
And claw all the way to the end.
The fight got so bad that I just didn't foresee how bad it got. That it actually did reach the point where a team who's probably as mentally strong as almost anybody else out there in the entire country got mentally, physically, and emotionally broken last night.
I think it's because, and I heard Desmond Howard say this during halftime, and I don't always agree with Desmond Howard. In fact, he and I used to go back and forth quite a bit back in 2014 on Baylor, TCU, and whoever else was ranked at the time, the first year of the college football playoff. But he did say this, and I felt this way, and I thought this, and I wish I would have put it out there on Twitter, although that doesn't mean anything really, is that you could blame Ohio State, perhaps, for what we saw last night as well. One, Georgia's that good. TCU, it just didn't go well. In some cases, some of the luck, and I don't mean that in a lucky, like, they shouldn't have been their way. They should have been there. But I think Ohio State scared the hell out of Georgia, should have scared the hell out of Georgia. And I think that after that game, that allowed Kirby Smart to then use whatever anyone was saying about, oh, TCU has a chance, whatever, in their favor. You can be physically ready. You could have great practices. You can be better across the board at every position. But they were also mentally as sharp as they could possibly be, razor blade sharp, as they entered that game when they came through the tunnel.
That was peak Georgia. That was Georgia on 10. That was
they don't need to be that good.
Nightmare scenario. And if you have the same mentality and you have the same emotions, running through you, and you have the same everything, but you take the players that Georgia has and the players that TCU has, and more often than not, pretty much every time, those Georgia players are going to win. Just you know what I'm saying? Just simply lining them up and playing the game. They have better players. They have a better roster. And last night, I think they have a bit better coaching as well. But they just on another level of athlete, which is why there's the recruiting talk that permeates all throughout college football and is a big part of whether or not a team like TCU can recruit where they recruit and can ever be where they are, or can ever, now the question will be, can they be what they've been, or probably better for the foreseeable future? These next couple years, they should still get some burn off this national title run. But does that, ultimately put them over the top, or is that, an insurmountable mountain, if you will, that you have to have back-to-back number one recruiting classes, or 10 straight top 5 classes, whatever Georgia's stats are at this point, to be able to reach that mountaintop? I don't know, but TCU made it awfully interesting with a bunch of classes that were nowhere near the level of Georgia's over these last several years. And you know what? Credit to them for getting to this point. But there was a talent disparity. I mean, TCU's best players were, completely held in check last night. Quentin
Johnson, Trey Hodges-Tomlinson had a tough night.
A lot of them did. Max Duggan had an awful night. Overall, obviously no Kendry Miller, but DeMarcado was not able to fill those shoes. And even if Kendry Miller was playing, I'm not sure if he could have filled those shoes. I don't know. He certainly would have helped rather than hurt. But, yeah, Georgia's just loaded for bear with talent.
All right, 65-7 the score. And we'll try to break if we can. Try to break here if we can. And then maybe we'll try to read some of those of you who have said things in the chat about last night and moving forward. But this stunned me, even with knowing the score 65-7. Here's a stat. Those were the drives that Georgia had last night. We've seen games get out of control. But, there's always going to be like a turnover on downs, or there's going to be a fumble or a pick. That's how sharp they were. All the way across the board, it's like an incredible lottery ticket with field goal and then end of game, and in between that, a punt. And it might have been, I don't know, maybe the opening drive of the third quarter when they already, of course, had the game at 38 or 35-7.
Yeah, that is just pure dominance. And I thought the TCU would be able to get – I wasn't expecting them to, hold Georgia to low scoring numbers or anything along those lines, but I did think they'd get more than one stop the entire game. I thought they could at least get more than one, and they couldn't. That's how good Stetson Bennett was. That's how
Bowers,
good.
The tight end?
Bowers was incredible. They had absolutely no answer for him, and really TCU's defense had no answer for anything. Georgia was ripping off first down runs on every single carry, it felt like, or every single pass. It was just first down, first down, first down, first down. They weren't having to work the chains and do a lot of that, really. It was just a free-for-all, and basically name your score and do whatever you want to do, because they did pull a lot of the starters there at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Could have made it as ugly as humanly possible, but instead had a nice, great swan song and really just a prolonged goodbye session for a lot of their veterans and a lot of their starters. But, kind of going back to the mentality thing and all of that, like I said, you could have the right mentality and just physically get whooped, and they got physically whooped last night. Still, you expect TCU to fight like they did against Michigan. It's just Georgia's just better.
Well,
just
they dictated the game against Michigan. Yeah,
they did. They did, and they deserve credit for that. But they got dictated last night in every way, shape, and form. But it was interesting listening to Sonny Dykes after the game, and this is why I bring it back to the mentality thing, is he said that he felt some, what was the word? It wasn't anxiety, but he didn't like the feeling in the locker room before the game. He didn't like
they were too hyped up or too...
I don't know exactly if it was too hyped. It's just they weren't in the right mind space. And one of the things that he said they're going to have to go back and rework or reassess and probably, do better if they get this opportunity in the future, and just in general do better is how they handled, I guess, that process of getting those guys ready and in the mindset and all of that for that game. And I don't know if it was hyperventilating. I don't know if it was just, I think obviously
you can do that though if you've never done something
right.
before.
I mean, being on that stage with the nerves and all that, it's just that they were such a mentally strong team all year long that it's like, what's one more game, right? And I don't know if it was seeing the opponent. I don't know if it was being in SoCal. I don't know what it is that changed it from the way that they were totally mentally perfect, for the most part against Michigan. But something happened to where they were a little bit overmodulated.
Yep.
And that's something that was different for them that has not been the case most of the time this year. And I found that very interesting. He didn't get into more specifics than that and didn't say like this was a cause thing or this was an assistant coach's thing or this was a me talking before. He didn't get into that specific, but something was off.
Well, one of the things, here's Eric Nefron. I hope I get that right. Nephron. That's what happens when you're facing the executioner.
Yeah, I mean it could be.
And I know that's, that's a joke, and I get it. The moment was too big from Mike. And then also Jonathan Ray saying, yeah, that's what he said. There are a lot of you appreciate the honesty of the show. Again, one choice. Thank you very much. Bobby B, BU alum here. I had to stop looking, watching. It was painful, hard to see your brother in arms get taken out like that, regardless of how you may feel about TCU. From Patrick, TCU had no answers on defense or offense. They looked like a young child bullied on the playground that went home shamed. And there was part of that as well. And again, this is not to take away where TCU was up until the thing kicked off. They still have all the memories, the comebacks, the wins, the Big 12 championship game. Yeah, that hurt. But then bouncing back to beat Michigan, which will be kind of the high point of the season to get to the championship game. Craig put up a poll, and we're going to do this later on today. The poll was, and we brought this up, and this is not to be like taking, would you rather have gone, well, do you have it, Garrett?
And can I explain this too?
Yeah,
like
go
this
ahead.
this was in light of the beatdown. Okay, as I say at the very bottom, and I didn't include Fiesta Bowl, that's what CFP win indicates, obviously.
Yeah.
But I wish I would have also put like Fiesta Bowl champs / CFP win. But as you know, you can't edit on Twitter, and I'm not signing up for the sub that I guess apparently allows you to. I'm not doing that, so I couldn't edit it. But yeah, here was my entire thinking with this. I think it's TCU. I thought even before, certainly before the blowout, it's TCU. No question about it. After the blowout, I still say it's TCU season that you would rather have. The millions of dollars in exposure and Sports Center time, the recruiting benefits, all of that.
And they've taken advantage of that.
And they've taken advantage of that. So I do think it's TCU, and I know I've got more Baylor people that follow me than anything else, so I'm not surprised that Baylor leads this poll. But that was so bad that I think it's at least worth asking the question of, would you rather go 12-2? And some people are like leaving details there, like this guy said that he'd rather win the Sugar Bowl than show up. And it's like, no, I'd rather be maybe a Big 12 champion and a Sugar Bowl champion and end the season on a winning streak and end the season with confetti falling in New Orleans. And let's also be very clear on something. Got some fan bases talking about the Sugar Bowl like it's the Goodyear Tire Bowl or something. And a bunch of fan bases that haven't won a Sugar Bowl and haven't even sniffed it. So, I understand that it's not playing in the playoff, and again, that's why I think it's TCU, even in light of last night. But the reason why I asked the question was because I remember how happy that ending was for Baylor in New Orleans, and I know how ugly that game was last night, to the point of losing by 58 points on national television, the only game in town, that it just made me wonder of TCU had an unforgettable historic season. The college football playoff win, I think, puts it over the top, but you didn't win the Big 12. That's okay. You made the playoff.
And there is no Big 12 regular season title.
No.
There is in basketball.
Yeah.
There is in basketball for whatever reason, not in football.
Absolutely not in football. But, like some people said, well, I'd rather play for it than not have a chance at it. And so, fine, that's your answer. But that was so historically bad that at least made me wonder of okay, you won the Fiesta Bowl and therefore a playoff game. But, man, you ended on such a bad note. So that's why I asked that question. I fully expect it to be TCU majority when all is said and done. I don't know when that poll runs out, but
24 hours.
I don't ask that question if it's 45-14. No. I asked that question when it was a 58-point blowout. And so,
all right.
yeah.
Mike